AudienceScience is a technology company. We build enterprise advertising management systems for some of the largest advertisers globally. What our system does is allows the advertiser to manage all their audience data, run all their media execution, and gain analytics and insights in one integrated system. The ultimate result of this is much more transparency for the advertiser and more efficiency out of their digital advertising spend. Companies who typically work with us, they tend to be companies that invest a lot in advertising, especially in digital advertising, companies who value transparency and who want to see how technology can transform their business. The other thing is we're a global company. So we're working with companies around the globe. So for complex global organizations, having one centralized piece of technology that can create standards around the world is incredibly valuable from a governance, consistency, and best practices standpoint. So big global advertisers tend to love working with AudienceScience. Yeah, so what I hear again and again from advertisers today is this call across the industry for more and more transparency. The past decade of digital advertising has actually resulted in advertisers getting less and less insight into what's happening with their campaigns, not more. So companies like AudienceScience, we're here to fix that, and advertisers are finally realizing this is a major issue. So what I expect over the next 9 months is advertisers to really press the people they're working with, their agencies, their intermediaries, other types of vendors, to get more transparency into where their money is really going and get better results because of that. Yeah, so during the reverse Q&A sessions, one of the things that consistently came up for all the advertisers at the table were challenges around measurement. And what became clear to them was they simply didn't have access to the data they needed to effectively measure not only their digital campaigns, but their marketing as a whole. And as senior marketing executives who were constantly trying to justify up to the other members of the C-suite as to how marketing could really make a difference for their organization, this lack of access to data, this lack of transparency into what was actually going on with their marketing was a real inhibitor to them doing their jobs. Yeah, so it's great to really be able to have interaction both between myself and the advertisers, but also, I think most importantly, the advertisers talking to one another and gaining best practices for one another. Typically, I go to a lot of conferences. What you tend to hear are a lot of people sitting up on stage, spouting the same ideas again and again and again in a traditional panel format. I think reverse Q&A breaks it down by having the panelists speak for a little bit, raise some questions, and then share those with the audience, where the audience can really spend most of their time discussing, sharing best practices, sharing challenges, and learning from one another. Yeah, what actually happens at the table is probably about 5 minutes of discussion which question we should answer, but from there people just get to business. And what you'll typically find is one advertiser who has a lot of subject matter expertise will begin to take the lead on the conversation and try to draw out challenges, and then from challenges, best practices and possible solutions from the entire team. And from there, we put together a consistent story and are able to deliver best practices and advice to the broader audience as a whole. Sure, I think what you try to get everybody at the table to do is to create 3 key takeaways. So people generally like to think in bullet points. If we can express ideas in bullet points, all the better. So if you can get participants to really say, hey, if you had to give 3 pieces of advice to the other marketers in the room, what would they be based upon our conversation? That really helps distill down the conversation to what the key elements really are that need to be taken away by the entire group. Yeah, so actually the thing that surprised me the most, and probably shouldn't have, is how focused on demographics marketers still are. So while when we get into conversation, all the marketers recognize, hey, maybe demographics don't matter as much as we traditionally thought. Maybe it's psychographics and behaviors and interests that really matter to our customers the most, and how our brands really relate to our customers. But again and again, when faced with a problem, marketers tend to go back to what they always did in traditional media, which is think about demographics, even though they do know that in the digital world, it's really this idea of interest, behaviors, psychographics that really matters when thinking about their customers. Yeah, so the fact that it's closed door and workshop style, I think creates a level of honesty that's in the conversation. One thing that happens at a lot of conferences is people won't ever admit that they don't know something or don't have an answer to something. And the fact is, no matter how experienced you are in this space, you're not going to know the answer to every question. In fact, you probably aren't going to know the answer to most questions. So I think the closed-door nature of the event allows people to be a little more open, and they get better results out of it, right? Because they're able to find somebody who does know the answer and honestly ask some questions, even if they might sound stupid on the surface. Those stupid questions, in fact, are probably usually the smartest questions to ask. Yeah, so what I liked about it wasn't death by panels, right? So typically what you find at a conference is same panels you hear at every single conference happen over and over and over again. And so no new ideas get shared, and a lot of misinformation actually gets spread by people who want to sound like they know what they're talking about, but don't actually know what they're talking about. So I think the idea of reverse Q&A, keeping it closed door, helps create a bit more of a social atmosphere to the entire event and helps people be a little more open, honest, and bring up new topics of discussion that you don't typically hear when you go to most of these trade shows. Yeah, one-to-one meetings are great. One of the things that I think we value most at these events is to be able to sit down with a marketer and speak one-to-one with them about what their problems are. And that helps us as a company in a couple ways. Firstly, if we have a solution to those problems, all the better. We get to build the relationship and hopefully can help the marketer through it. But the second thing is we hear about new problems, right? Because we're hearing it directly for the marketer. So over that course of the conversation, if they're bringing up problems we didn't know existed in the marketplace or we hadn't thought of solutions before, that's really useful for me running research at this company to be able to come back to the organization and say, hey, this is something that our potential clients are thinking about right now. How can we as a company, given our vision for the marketplace, really affect this? Yeah, so we met a lot of interesting people. Lots of great companies were represented there. Companies like JCPenney, NASCAR, Hershey's, JP Morgan Chase, Turner, Viacom, News Corp. These are big global organizations, and it was great to hear more about their challenges and what they're interested in as marketers.